I tripped into a haunted medieval fight, and what I discovered will haunt me forever. I never should have opened that door. I remember that chilling moment, my hand on the cold brass knob. Who knew the darkness would wrap around me like a shroud? Fear gripped me as I stepped inside. The faint smell of damp earth and something acrid made my stomach churn. My heart raced in my chest, and all I could see were shadows dancing against the stone walls. I was just trying to find my way home. After a long day, I had taken a shortcut through that old, decrepit building, thinking it would save time. It was just supposed to be a quiet walk beneath the flickering street lamps, surrounded by whispers of trees in the night. But no, I had to go and be curious. The air grew heavy. It was thick, almost suffocating. I strained to hear something other than my own breath. The silence was oppressive. Then I heard it. A clash of metal? A groan? My pulse quickened. I pressed further inside, each step echoing, reverberating off the cold stone. The floor was uneven beneath my feet. My shoes scraped against gritty cobblestones. A flicker of movement caught my eye. I froze. Shadows shifted in the corners of the room. Something was lurking, waiting. Beyond the darkness, I could almost make out figures. They moved fluidly, their bodies enmeshed in a dance of chaos. Ghostly knights clashed with swords, their faces obscured. Whispers became a torrent, hushed conversations in an unknown language. My mind raced. Was I seeing things? I took another step, and suddenly a sword clanged dangerously close, sending a jolt of fear through me. I stumbled back, eyes wide, heart pounding. I wanted to scream, but my voice fell silent. I turned to run, but then, like a dreadful spell, I felt the air shift. The figures halted. Everything froze for just a heartbeat. My breath was shallow, the room an electric heartbeat, pulsating all around me, and then, a dark shape emerged, towering and ominous. Shadows twisted and curled around it like tendrils reaching for me. My skin prickled with dread. It stepped closer. I felt the overwhelming urge to flee. My legs screamed for movement, but I was paralyzed. Who was this figure? What was happening? The tension was suffocating. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure loomed, its features indistinct but radiating an arcane aura that felt alive, breathing. I could feel a pull, a magnetic force drawing me closer, even as every instinct screamed at me to turn and run. It shifted slightly, the shadows around it dancing, revealing hints of armor glinting like old bones in moonlight. There was something distinctly wrong about the way it moved, too fluid, too graceful for something so fearsome. Then, just as I felt the crushing weight of despair settle in my chest, the figure raised a gauntlet hand and pointed directly at me. A spark ignited in the depths of its dark gaze, and I was locked into a stare that turned my blood to ice. Vision blurred, then narrowed to a pinhole as icy fingers tightened around my throat. What was happening to me? Suddenly, the raucous sounds of battle erupted once more around me. The clang of swords intensified, reverberating like a battle cry that echoed through the ages, and my senses raw, I stumbled backward, my heart thrumming like a war drum. The knights resumed their fierce clashing, oblivious to my presence, or perhaps not. I turned to flee but was met with an unyielding stone wall. The shadows shifted again, enveloping me, and I felt myself being drawn into the turmoil. My surroundings morphed into a twisted simulacrum of the fight, a haunting limbo where the past bled into the present. Either I was losing my grip on reality, or I was becoming part of this dreadful tableau. Through the chaos, my eyes caught something. The figure, still pointing, now seemed to dissolve into the battle, swirling with the fray like mist among warriors. It was leading the onslaught, guiding the knights with predatory grace. Curiosity seeped in, battling my horror. Who or what was it? In that moment, a piercing shriek split the air, tearing through the chaos. The ground beneath me shuddered and an icy wind rushed through the hall, snapping me back to the shrinking, fleeting space I occupied. I spun around to face the source, and there it was, a half-formed ghostly visage, wearing an agonizing expression. It reached out for me, fingers trembling as if grasping for solace. The weight of its sorrow crashed into my heart, and I faltered. "Save me!" it wailed, the voice distorted and caught between worlds, a desperate plea that held the weight of centuries. The moment its voice resonated within me, an unbearable sorrow coursed through my veins. I watched as spectral figures tied to the battlefield paused, as if they could hear, feel. The surreal confluence of emotions, fear, pity, excitement swelled within me until I felt I might burst. Time warped, stretching like a fragile thread, and suddenly the minuscule opening behind me, the path I had ventured through, seemed impossibly far away. Panic gripped me, limbs becoming leaden, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I could see them, the knights, gazing in my direction, their hollow eyes burning with accusation. Before I could react, the figure returned, plunging forward from the fray with an urgency that left no room for doubt. It surged toward me, the darkness coiling ever tighter. The shrieking figure wavered in the air, eyes filled with an unknown terror, both my own and that of this cursed being. "Join us!" the tortured visage cried, a promise woven into the despair that echoed from its eternal torment. The ground shook more violently around me. The battlefield surged and twisted, reality splintering at the seams. Desperation clawed at my throat. I wanted to scream, wanted to fight against time and fate. But the power of the darkness intensified, compelling me closer to the embrace of the haunted. And then, amidst the chaos, the earth ruptured, and a fissure opened at my feet. Darkness emanated from within it, a smell of decay and ashes swirling around and up, wrapping around my ankles, tugging me down into an abyss of freezing despair. I grasped for the edge, hoping to hold on, but the shadows swallowed my cries, echoing in the void. Everything felt as if it was folding inward, collapsing into a singularity of dread. I didn't know if what surrounded me was the battle of the damned or something worse. My last breath escaped in a shuddering gasp as I felt myself being pulled down. All I could make out was the face of that anguished ghost, the eyes pleading as if to tell me the final secret, the final horror, and then nothing but darkness, spinning endlessly. When the darkness enveloped me, it wasn't the stillness of oblivion but a cacophony of whispers, a haunting chorus that slithered through the void, pressing against my mind with icy inevitability. Each breath became a struggle, the air thickening around me, tainted with the metallic scent of old blood and decay. I wasn't falling. I was drowning in the sorrow of countless souls, a tide of despair that threatened to engulf my very essence. Emerging from the abyss, I found myself not in the clutches of eternal darkness but thrust back into the battlefield, the very ground beneath my feet trembling as if it were alive, a writhing serpent of earth and blame. The chaos surged, a tempest of clashing steel, screams twisted into anguished roars. Yet now something vital felt different. Hope flickered like a dying flame as my breath quickened in fear. I stumbled to the side, suddenly aware that I was no longer within the protective shroud of nothingness but stood upon the trembling earth, the air around me saturated with the lingering taste of desperation. The battles raged on, but the echoes now held a sinister resonance as the knights and their supernatural adversaries converged, forming grotesque shapes against the backdrop of madness. Their hollow eyes repeatedly flitted to me, mouths agape in wordless curses, shields raised as though to encircle me. The figure, my captor and puppet master, loomed large amid the fray, directing the melee with an uncanny focus that sent shivers racing down my spine. Suddenly its presence felt intimate, drawing a connection deeper than mere horror. A memory stirred, an unshakable sensation that we were akin, vessels of a shared curse, our fates entwined in a nightmarish dance. A flash of movement drew my attention. A knight, battered and bloodied, crashed to the ground. I flinched as his gaze locked onto mine, fear mingling with resolve in his eyes. I could hear his muffled voice cutting through the tumult, calling out for salvation, yet it held no words I could comprehend. Instead, a dull realization washed over me. He was trying to warn me. "Run!" he screamed, body crumbling like fragmented glass but spirit burning with urgency. His form began to dissipate, colors blending within the maelstrom of chaos. The figure turned its unreadable gaze towards me, and the pull of its magic grew stronger, drowning out the night's desperate CRY.as I turned to flee. An unseen force gripped my feet, holding me in place as shadows coalesced around me like a vice. An anguished wail rang out, reverberating through the air like a battle horn, and time itself seemed caught in a fragile web of agony. To my horror, the apparitions began to rise. Clad in armor that bore no heraldry, only the bitter stains of betrayal, they emerged from the abyss, their expressions twisted in anguish and ire. Grief untold spurred their movements like an ancient curse crafted for torment. They approached, their spectral forms reaching for me, and I was paralyzed with fear. The figure at the helm drew nearer, its very essence an inky darkness that seemed to signify despair's inevitable grasp. I could feel the oppressive weight of their suffering pressing against my chest, each pulse of darkness wrenching at my heart. "Save us!" they shrieked in unison, a harrowing melody that tore through the screams of the battlefield. It wasn't a plea. It was a command laden with the promise of change, and I could sense that if I didn't find a way to escape their grip, I'd become one of them, lost and entwined in this cursed cycle of combat and pain. Steeling myself against the torrent, I summoned all the strength I had left. I ran, feet pounding against the crumbling earth, veering through a sliver of chaos where nights clashed and shadows spun wildly. I could feel the urge to turn back, drawn by an unseen tether, but I pressed on, adrenaline surging through my veins. As I neared the edge of the battlefield, a blinding light erupted from the central chaos, splitting the dark sky like a celestial omen. My pace faltered as the furious energy coalesced into a towering figure, ethereal and majestic, a counterbalance to the suffering around me. But with a rush of wind, all at once, the heavy stones of fate converged. In that instant, the ground beneath me crumbled, giving way once more, and I felt the world tilt as I was propelled backward, weightless, into a void where echoes of screams wove in and out of reality. The light surged, illuminating figures, some familiar, some now lost within the darkness, an invitation or a warning, perhaps both. The last thing I saw was the anguished faces of those once noble, now consumed by despair and rage, reflecting the truth of my peril. And as I plummeted into the murmuring depths, I realized it wasn't just my life at stake. I might very well be the key to either their salvation or damnation. Then, all went black, leaving only the dreadful silence of an unsolved mystery and a flicker of hope buried deep within the shadows that awaited my return. The void embraced me, a chilling respite from the chaos I had fled. As I descended into darkness, the sensation of weightlessness gave way to a creeping chill that nibbled at my sanity, a cold realization settling in my bones. I could no longer hear the cacophony of war, but whispers began anew, taunting and hissing secrets in a language too ancient to trust. When I landed, it was not back upon solid ground but into an underground realm, lit by an eerie phosphorescence that clawed at the edges of my vision. Shapes flickered in the periphery, shadowy figures with long, gnarled fingers reaching towards me from the depths of the darkness. They were wraiths, their forms grotesquely distorted, eyes hollow and glinting with malice. Panic surged, but my body remained unresponsive, a marionette without strings. As the whispers grew louder, I heard fragments of their shattered lives: a soldier betrayed by his comrades, a maiden lost to madness, a child swallowed by shadows. Each tale carried the stench of remorse and fury, composing a symphony of anguish that made my heart race. Then, with a sudden spark of clarity, I realized the truth. These were the souls of the damned, trapped in this limbo, their anguish merging with my own. "Join us," they urged, their voices intertwining like threads in a cursed tapestry. "Help us break the chains of our suffering." The ground beneath me trembled, and fragmented memories of the battle surged within me. I was caught not only in a place of torment but also in a web spun from pain, desperation, and a shared destiny. The energy pulsated around me as the figures closed in, their spectral forms swirling, drawing near with the intent to ensnare me within their endless sorrow. My very essence throbbed in sympathy, urging me to reach out, but I resisted, knowing all too well the price of such a bond. Suddenly, the air shifted, becoming thick and electric. A sharp scream sliced through the whispers, distinct and human. I turned, eyes darting through the shadows until they settled upon a small flicker of warmth, a candle, desperately flickering in the suffocating dark. Drawn like a moth to flame, I took an uneasy step toward the light, the shadows retreating just enough to grant me clarity. As I approached, the figure of a woman materialized, her ethereal beauty marked by tattered clothes. Her eyes, luminous pools of longing, bore into my soul with a mix of fervor and despair. "You must help us," she implored, voice laced with urgency. "We are bound to this place, trapped by our own failures. You alone can break the curse." "What curse?" I stammered, struggling to comprehend the weight of her words. "Blood spilled and malice of betrayal unavenged." The candle flickered violently, casting grotesque shadows that danced like demons on the walls. "The vampire lord commands this realm with the pain of our spirits. He feeds on sorrow, a parasite thriving on our despair. Only by reconnecting the threads of battle and manipulating fate can we pen our own ending. But time runs thin." Before I could respond, an unnatural howl of fury ripped through the air, reverberating like thunder. The wraiths recoiled, their expressions morphing from sorrow to terror, as the light around us began to dim. From the depths of the cavern, a figure emerged, a monstrous silhouette brimming with malice. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, a creature of nightmares, its fanged maw dripping with the remnants of the lost, shards of their suffering clinging to his form. "You dare disturb my domain?" the vampire lord roared, voice resonating through the very walls of the cavern, shaking my core. "What foolishness leads mortals to believe they have any power here?" The wraiths cried out in agony, voices mingling with the wind, a chorus of despair sweeping through the cavern as the tension mounted. I felt the threatening pull of the wraiths behind me, their whispers now frantic and pleading. "Your destiny is intertwined. Will you serve him or reclaim your strength? Choose, and do so quickly." An impossible choice loomed before me, one drenched in betrayal and desperation. The light from the candle flickered, a fragile beacon swaying amidst the growing darkness, and time felt like a tightening noose around my neck. Suddenly, the vampire lord lunged at us, eyes wide with fury, the air thick with intent. And in that terrifying moment, understanding clicked like a bolt. Freedom, salvation, and doom hung on the blade of my decision, yet all I could think was the binding fate lurking just outside my grasp. The shadows surged and intertwined, twisted by the malevolent force that stood before me, threatening to devour everything I could ever hope to save. "Choose!" the woman screamed, losing her radiance as dread deepened. But as my hand stretched toward the warmth of the candle, the world around me warped, the air ripped and twisted, and all erupted into dissonance. With the vampire closing in and my choice suspended like a blade over my head, I was torn from the light. The last sensation was not one of panic but of an earth-shattering realization. I was pulled deeper, into the very fabric of history, towards an unspeakable truth that would change everything. Then, like that, the darkness swallowed me whole, leaving nothing but a haunting echo of a choice I still hadn't made. The darkness enveloped me entirely, a cloak of despair that pressed against my skin like icy fingers. I landed not softly upon a floor but rather collapsed into a torrent of shadows that writhed beneath me, whispering secrets only they knew. For an agonizing moment, I was weightless, adrift in an ocean of sorrow, until my body struck the damp earth, creating a reverberation that shook my very bones. I lifted my head, blinking against the inky blackness that seemed to pulse like a living being. The air was thick with the stench of decay, as if I had plunged into a forgotten tomb. A faint glow caught my eye, a flicker of light struggling against the crushing weight of night, far off yet somehow close. With every ounce of will, I pushed myself to my feet and shuffled toward it, the whispers swirling around me, spilling stories that clawed at my mind. Lost. Betrayed. Forgotten. They echoed, each word resonating like a forgotten lullaby over a child's grave. My heartbeat quickened as I approached the light, drawn by an inexplicable pull, my pulse sinking to the rhythm of the dimming luminescence. When I broke through the last barrier of darkness, I stumbled into a chamber filled with an ethereal glow, pale and ghostly, illuminating the figures that danced wildly beneath it. They were not wraiths but the remnants of forgotten warriors, their faces obscured by soil and sorrow. Armor glinted with a shimmering sheen, bearing the scars of countless battles, now twisted and tragic tales. They bore not swords but the memories of their demise, forging a nightmare that trapped them in an endless spectral duel. With a tremor of realization, I realized the histories entwined here were not only of the wraiths wandering the caves but also of the souls reliving their catastrophic failures. Before me, a visceral tableau unfolded: a knight charging forward, his blade raised, only to falter inches away from his target, a treacherous comradeship that had fed him to the wolves. A maiden cowered in the shadows, her tragic fate a brutal echo of betrayal, as jagged blades clipped her cries of injustice. "No!" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper as I staggered back, but the horror only intensified. The air around me thickened, each breath a labor, as a spectre surged forth from the mass, a warrior clad in rusted armor, his visage twisted in anguish. "You have come to witness our doom!" he bellowed, his voice a cacophony that vibrated through the caverns. "You are tied to our pain!" Panic coursed through me as bone-deep dread settled in my gut. "I'm not part of this. I am just a vessel," he interjected, voice booming like thunder. "You carry their sins, your blood is their key. And now, they want to break free." His hollow eyes locked onto mine, their desolation speaking volumes, a demanding plea for liberation, held captive by my very existence. As realization dawned, the candle flickering from before resurfaced in my mind, and so did the vampire lord's growl echoing from the edges of my memory. I felt the remnants of their histories tug at me, memories coiling around my heart like serpents, binding me to the anguish of the long dead. And then, like the sudden strike of lightning, I understood I was both a voyeur and a participant in their ceaseless plight. A sudden rush of shadows cascaded across the chamber, teeth bared, as a chilling howl echoed through the air, the vampire's voice rising above the din. "Your essence nurtures them. Your fear is their balm." The wraiths surged from all directions, their transparent hands clawing at the memories as if their last hope lay in dragging me into the fray. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in ragged gasps, finding my footing on the damp, uneven ground. The chamber pulsated with dark energy, engulfing me in its embrace, and as desperation gripped my heart, the weight of their hopes and resentments threatened to draw me down into the abyss. "Help us," the knight intoned, desperation lacing his voice. "In this cursed place, you can either choose to silence our screams or succumb to the ever-hungry void." As the air crackled with tension, shapes began to swirl and blur around me, the boundaries between reality and the spectral thinned. The centuries of anguish pressed heavy upon me, and I felt myself being drawn closer to them, the warmth, the despair, the promise of release entwined in a battle I did not want to fight. But before I could voice my refusal, the very fabric of the chamber quaked, and the already dim light flickered once more. The walls seemed to breathe, alive with shadows eager to consume. The vampire lord's furious laughter echoed behind me, a sound filled with malice and triumph. "Watch closely," he taunted, "for the game has just begun." And then came the blinding darkness, a surge that swept over me, leaving only the smoldering ashes of my resolve. My last thoughts spiraled away, leaving me grasping at the edges of an unfathomable truth, and just as I was about to be reclaimed by the void, a startling realization struck. I was not alone. A pair of piercing eyes stared back at me from the shadows. Eyes that were not filled with malice, but rather a cold and calculating clarity. Eyes that mirrored my own terror, yet spoke a different language. And with a flash, hope ignited within me, a flame forged through fear, desperation, and an indecipherable bond that tethered our fates together. This soul stood on the edge of the eternal abyss with me. But as the choir of battles raged in the shadows, I realized I had a far more urgent question now. Who were they? And were they friend or foe? I felt the pulse of dread in the air as the figure stepped closer, shrouded in the gloom yet eerily illuminated by the remnants of that ghastly glow. With each tentative step, the air crackled around us like struck flint, and their features began to sharpen, a face etched with the lines of anguish and determination, hauntingly familiar. Recognition flared briefly in my gut, gnawing at me like something long buried. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking but laced with a hint of defiance. The ethereal figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, they stared deeply into my eyes, as if attempting to sift through the layers of my soul. A terrible weight settled around my heart, a sensation that we were both vessels navigating a labyrinth of unseen horrors. I am what you will become, they finally replied, their voice a soft whisper that cut through the cacophony of sorrow like a dagger. I am a reflection of your fate trapped within these walls. The words echoed in the chamber, reverberating ominously around us. What does that mean? I asked, desperation curling my fingers into fists at my sides. The fighting phantoms around us came to an abrupt halt, all eyes both spectral and earthly shifting to us in a chilling synchrony. The night's anguish morphed into a desperate gaze, as if he too sensed the connection between us. They need your pain, my reflection continued, stepping closer still. The shadows shifted as they spoke, swirling a little more aggressively, as if their collective breath held an insatiable hunger. Their fear has awakened something within you, a darkness that you have yet to embrace. Retribution requires a sacrifice, and you are the key. With those words, the memories of the fallen began to surge, pooling around my ankles like a thick, viscous fog. I felt myself choke on their despair, their unending thirst to break free from this haunted cycle. I could feel them curling around me, their memories reaching deep into my own past lost friendships, broken promises, and a lifetime of guilt flooding back like an army rushing toward its fallen king. I don't want this, I yelled, desperation clawing at the back of my throat, choking me. A cacophony of anguished whispers rose, a crescendo attacking my senses, while the spectral night's cry rang out, plaintive and warning. Beware the bonds that tie you to this place. You tread the line between chaos and salvation. My reflection's form began to tremble, flickering as if they were caught in a tempest of emotion. Their cold eyes turned mournful, unveiling a sorrow likened to that of lost memories. But you can change it. If you face the truth of your own darkness, you might bring freedom to us all or doom. As they spoke, a chilling realization swept over me, the air thickened with an ancient presence, the oppressive weight of time folding in on itself. I could feel another wave of despair rising as the shadows twisted violently, shifting as the darkness loomed above, shaped like an enormous figure, a giant wreathed in despair. The vampire lord materialized from the shadows, his face contorted into a wicked grin, eyes ablaze with malice. How quaint, he crooned, his voice a silk-draped knife against my skin. Two forsaken souls finding comfort in each other's company before the inevitable chaos ensues. Isn't it delightful? With a snap of his gaunt fingers, the chamber erupted into chaos. Whispers turned into screams, the warriors' forms lunged at me as if time had unfurled for a moment. My reflection's face morphed with the urgency of 1,000 words unspoken, pleading, but I could barely process his warning before the giant shadow launched forward, a mass of darkness with sinister intentions that I turned to run but found myself ensnared in tendrils of darkness. They coiled around my limbs, pulling me down, each movement sending sharp pangs of guilt and sorrow through my core. No! Let me go! I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the cacophony. Suddenly, I felt my reflection grasp my arm. Remember, only truth can set you free, they implored, desperately fighting against the binding shadows. Just then, a fanged smile broke from the vampire lord. So, the little lamb thinks they can escape? Explore the depths of your darkness, child. Only then will you evolve. As the shadows pulled me into an inescapable embrace, reality twisted in on itself, and I was hurled back through a kaleidoscope of fractured memories, none of which were my own. Specters danced and hovered around the fringes of the devastation, their agonized faces mirroring my own terror. In an instant, I was standing before a split timeline. One side beckoned like a light, a choice I could make, a chance to unravel the sins of others, but the dark scenario unfurled just next to it, wild and full of monstrous faces, where the emptiness seemed to be waiting for my collapse. Choose, the vampire's voice echoed in a triumphant sneer, or be devoured. As the realization clawed its way into the depths of my mind, suffocating every thought of clarity, reality began to splinter again. and amid the cacophony of wails and the striking of cold metal against stone, I noticed them glowing chains slithering toward me from the shadows, eager to bind me in their eternal darkness. And just as I felt their cold latch around my wrist, a blinding light erupted from the heart of the void, an unholy cry breaking the silence. A child's voice, echoing from the depths of despair, "Help me!" The choice hung between us, lingered precariously in the air, all hope teetering on the precipice, as I stood paralyzed, caught in the eye of chaos, battling an insatiable fear who would be lost in the shadows next. The blinding light pulsed in waves, illuminating the swirling chaos around me. The chains halted in their pursuit, momentarily paralyzed by the radiance that seeped from the void. Faint echoes of that child's voice resonated in the corners of my mind, every syllable laced with despair, a plea for salvation that gnawed at my heart. "Help me!" The cry was raw, fragmented, sending tremors of fear coursing through my veins. A sense of urgency clawed at me. I wasn't just a passive observer anymore. My choices felt heavy, forging pathways of possibility, each one entwined with an ever-growing dread. The vampire lord sneered, his pallid features warped into a grotesque caricature of amusement. Ah, the innocence of youth! A fleeting flame among the shadows, he mocked, stretching out a skeletal hand toward the light. Let it guide you, follow it, if you dare. But remember, every choice carries a weight, and the echoes of the past will always haunt your future. Behind him, the spectral figures writhed, their tortured faces morphing into a cacophony of anguished gestures. Desperation clawed at my throat as I tore my gaze from the vampire's malevolent grin. That child! Their call shot through my core like an arrow of icy fear. I took a step forward, drawn into the luminous glow at the center of this torment, edging closer to the light that flickered with the promise of hope. The child's silhouette began to sharpen, a slight frame clad in tattered remnants of a dress, features obscured by shadows and tears. I could sense a connection even through the tempest of fear, and a profound urge forced my feet to march toward the brilliance. "Please, help me," the voice sobbed softly, trembling in cadence with the pulsating light. "I'm trapped just like you." But as I stepped closer, the ground beneath me quaked, and the shadows retaliated with furious tendrils, clawing hungrily, thirsting for my very essence. I faltered, pulling back as the weight of my own darkness surged forth like a tidal wave, crashing against the fragile bond one was forging with the child. Suddenly the knight, distressed yet resolute, surged forward, his shouts drowned in a cacophony of unrest. "You must choose. Save them, or succumb to the darkness. But beware of the truth you unearth." As I hesitated, the vampire's laughter echoed through the chamber, mocking my indecision. How deliciously tragic! To aid the lost, you'd also risk becoming one of them. His eyes glimmered with depraved glee, the shadows writhing more hungrily in response to my turmoil. The child's form dimmed, and their voice trembled as despair seeped into their plea. "I didn't want this. Help me, please." My heart raced. Each pulse resonated in tandem with the fading light, a rhythm of ethereal hope vibrating against the drawn abyss. The decision loomed larger, pressing against my sanity. I could choose to reach for the child, to grasp their fading light and perhaps tear them from this hell. But what would that mean for me? Was I prepared to confront the darkness that clung so desperately to my essence? As the shadows quaked beneath me, threatening to consume everything, including my unwilling heart, visions of past sins flooded back, a distant memory of laughter turning sour, the echoes of screams long silenced, guilt becoming the chains that weighed me down. I saw faces lost, loves, friendships torn apart by chaos, though they meant nothing now in this moment, as their shadows loomed alongside my own. "Make your choice." The vampire's voice roared through the chaos, each word wrapping around me like a noose, smothering reason and courage. "Time is fleeting, and your victory will matter little against the tide of despair that awaits." In that splitting moment, I felt the light of the child flicker weakly within my chest, a vibrant candle about to be extinguished. Meanwhile, the shadows surrounded me, pressing close, whispering promises of release, promises insisting I join them in their darkness, voices filled with the echoes of lost souls yearning for warmth. I braced myself and breathed deeply, the very act to tether to. The light the child's presence ignited something within me and illuminated the darkness that longed to implode. But the weighing dread still clung to my heart. "I will save you," I said, voice shaking but determined, as I plunged toward the dazzling glow, ready to plunge into the unknown. With that final step, the earth trembled violently, and the shadows erupted around me, dragging me back toward the vampire lord's twisted designs, every whisper curling like smoke in my eyes. But as my fingers extended toward the fleeting light, a series of piercing shrieks erupted from the child, drowning out all reason. "No! Dante!" Suddenly, the ground beneath me shattered like glass, and the world spun into chaos. A cascade of fractured colors swallowed the room whole. In that bewildering haze, I heard the vampire's triumphant laugh echoing, unnervingly familiar, gaining strength. As the child's light flickered dangerously near the edge, I was hurled into a maelstrom of abyss, my fate entwined with countless others lost in despair. And through the vortex, a final chilling whisper trailed behind me: "The truth will haunt you forever." And then darkness consumed everything. The swirling void slowly released its suffocating grip, depositing me in a scene painted by madness. I stumbled into an unfamiliar realm, a dilapidated medieval town caught in an eternal twilight. Cobblestone streets glistened ominously under the pallid glow of a waning moon, and the insufferable scent of decay gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. Shadows flickered across the broken facades of structures long abandoned, each nuance creating the illusion of movement, as if something unseen lurked within. The unsettling atmosphere clawed at my sanity. It wasn't simply fear, it was a gnawing dread, a relentless whisper that surged through me, urging retreat. I could hear faint murmurs weaving through the air, braided tales of long-buried sorrow and regret. Each heartbeat echoed against the gruesome backdrop of whispers. They called out names from a past I couldn't recall, echoing through the cracks of my memory like cobwebs snagging at fleeting recollections. Panic struck when a figure darted past, cloaked in rags and shadows. I whipped around, heart racing, but the streets were empty. Only shimmering wisps of fog flowed where moments before there had been life. Or death. I could no longer tell which it was. I pressed onward, compelled by an unyielding force pulling me deeper into the heart of the town. As I ventured further, I caught fleeting glimpses of grotesque faces tinted gray, eyes wide open in eternal horror, yet devoid of life. Each one was a canvas of desperation and despair, seemingly frozen in agonized expressions. "Help us!" their shapes whispered in unison, their words wrapping around me, curling like thick smoke, binding me to this wretched reality. I felt their longing, a craving for release, a hunger for an end that I could not provide. Suddenly, I rounded a corner and stopped short. Before me loomed an ancient well, its stones dark and slick with moisture, a gaping maw amidst the cobblestones inviting my gaze upon its depth. I stepped closer, breathing heavily as whispers spilled forth from the void, filling my mind with jagged memories of the child from before. "Find me," it echoed, bobbing like a frail boat adrift upon a stormy sea, pulling me toward the precipice. The whispers crescendoed and began morphing into something else, mingling with a harrowing chant, a cacophony of lost souls trapped beneath the earth, their chorus pleading for liberation. I leaned over the edge of the well, the air thick with dread as a chill seeped into my bones. But even as I peered into the dark orifice, a sudden glimpse caught my eye, something moving deep within, darting just beyond the limits of light, a disfigured mask of misery staring back at me. Before I could recoil, a hand shot from the depths, a skeletal arm grasping desperately, fingers clawing toward me. I stumbled back, heart racing, but the well's murmur transformed into clarity as it became one with the child's voice. "Please, I'm here. Just reach for me." My mind spun, the ghostly figures surrounding me, their eyes gleaming with a tragic intensity, urging me to act. Yet fear held me bound. What awaited me if I extended my hand? As if feeding on my hesitation, the shadows thickened, swirling in a black whirlpool, pulling me closer to the well's edge, the forgotten anguished faces coiling around my ankles like chains. And as I wrestled with my inner turmoil, a flicker of movement caught my eye, an ornate dagger, thrust into the ground several paces from me, its blade dulled by years but its presence hefty with promise and peril. The townsfolk's whispers swelled into a tempest around me. "The dagger will guide you and protect you. With a mind under siege, I traversed toward the weapon. Shuddering fingers grasped the hilt, sending a jolt of energy coursing through me. The shadows hissed in response, wrapping tighter around my waist, coil by coil, as if sensing the surge of defiance erupting within me. Now! Make your choice! The vampire's voice called once more from the echoing cavern of my mind, potent as if he had always existed, lurking just behind my thoughts. It resonated with sinister urgency that harmonized with the desperate cries of the souls unresolved. Was the child truly lost? With the dagger in hand and a path carved toward the well, could I withstand the truth lurking therein? I felt something rising within me, an awareness, an understanding that I had barely begun to scrape the surface of. With trembling resolve, I peered back into the chthonic depths, the echoes of past lives feeding on my doubt. The dagger quivered with energy, and the child's voice waxed desperate with fervor. I am waiting. Please don't leave me. Before I could wrestle with that icy hand encroaching closer still, the ground beneath me shuddered, and with a horrifying crack, the well began to widen, a grim rift opening beneath my feet. Caught in a dance of fate and choice, I stumbled as the abyss yawned wide, threatening to swallow me whole. Shadows swirled and sucked the breath from my lungs, screaming in hatred. Just as hope threatened to vanish, caught in the tide of night, a vision morphed before me, a haunting glimpse of the child, a translucent figure screaming in my mind, their outline glowing amidst the surrounding despair. And then came a voice, deep and echoing, a terrible promise: once you enter, there will be no turning back. And with that, darkness consumed me again. As the darkness enveloped me, cloying like the fetid stench of decay, I felt the familiar clutch of panic take hold once more. This time, it came not from the fear of being utterly lost, but from the realization that I now teetered on the precipice of something profound, something that hungered for my essence. With the dagger gripped tightly in my hand, I felt its cold steel pulse as though it shared in my trepidation. Blackness surrounded me, thickening like fog, but through it came a flickering flicker of the world beyond. I found myself crouched on the stone floor of an underground chamber, uneven in shape yet ornate in despair. Dim torches flickered on the walls, casting long shadows that writhed and twisted, transforming familiar forms into abominable figures. I blinked rapidly, trying to adjust my focus, and as my senses sharpened, the air grew colder, prickling my skin. There was an echo to my breath, and surrounding me were remnants of what had once been a barbaric fight between good and evil, caught in eternal conflict. Spectral warriors, clad in blackened armor stained by centuries of bloodshed, cast anguished looks toward me. Lifeless eyes bore witness to their defeat, a tableau of violence crystallized in aching silence. The ghostly shimmer of swords clashed reverberated through the chamber, an unending loop laced with cries of terror. I stumbled forward, exploring this forsaken place, my heart pounding in rhythm with the ethereal resonance. The dagger pulsed still, hot against my palm, as though it sensed the hunger of the cursed souls trapped in this eternal cycle of torment. I passed a battle-worn banner, unraveling at the edges, emblazoned with the sigil of a hand reaching upward, a plea for mercy, a promise long broken. Do not linger, nor be tempted by the whispers, a voice rasped from the dark. My breath hitched as a figure materialized at the far end of the chamber, hunched and cloaked, its features obscured by shadows. A twisted grin flickered across its lips like an ember ready to ignite. The child is just another pawn, an echo of their suffering, it cooed, slinking closer, and I could feel the atmosphere compressing around me. The very air tasted metallic and raw with despair. There are greater horrors here than envy and longing. Suddenly, the memories rushed back, a blurred montage of the child's laughter, lost smiles, and faded innocence. How could this wretched place claim such purity? I gripped the dagger tighter, muscles taut with indecision. How could I know who to trust among the phantoms of despair? Join us, the figure hissed, reaching out a skeletal hand. We have much to offer you: power, freedom from the past, eternal strength. The illusion of choice was tantalizing, yet beneath it lay a forced submission to their mastery, the price steep and horrifying. Leave this realm. A new voice thundered from the darkness, resonating like an ancient bell tolling for a lost hour. An imposing figure burst forth into the dim light, eyes ablaze with a righteous fire that seemed untouched by the despair. Do not be fooled by their lies. This is nothing more than a prison, a snare for lost souls. The chamber shuddered as the opposing wills collided. Curses poured forth from the specters, resonating in growls of anger, while the forceful plea from the newcomer gilded the air with hope. But as the two entities faced off, desperate screams echoed from the very stones, the cries of the damned, swirling like a tempest. "Take her!" the cloaked figure shrieked, its voice transforming into a cacophony, melding and distorting, guttural and chilling. Through a veil of shadows, I caught glimpses of tortured souls rising like moths to a flame, clawing at my very being as if loyalty lay within their grasp and my energy would amplify their wretched existence. "All will be revealed," the male voice promised, but before I could process the choice laid bare before me, the chamber jerked violently. A quaking rumbled through the ground, fissures erupting across the surface as if the ancient foundations were alive, determined to reclaim their prey. I could feel the darkness closing in, the figure drawing closer still, lustful hands grasping for my soul. My heart raced, the dagger's power thrumming with urgency, both a beacon and a weapon against the despair enveloping me. "Choose! Choose!" The voices clamored with a frenzy, distortions resembling laughter, but behind it lay a deep, gnawing hunger that threatened to devour my very essence. A blinding flash erupted, searing the darkness and illuminating the chamber, as I raised the dagger high. But in that moment of clarity, as the shadows shrieked and the desperate figures clawed at me, I saw it, an arcane door materializing from the depths of the stone, a tantalizing glimpse of light beckoning from beyond. Without thinking, I lunged toward the door, propelled by instinct and desperation. I had no idea what awaited me on the other side, but the sudden surge of bone-chilling laughter echoed in my ears. "Fool! You may escape this night, but the darkness will consume you in the dawn." With that, I plunged through the radiant opening just as the ground shook violently beneath me, and the cacophony of despair transformed into a soul-piercing shriek that resonated through the earth itself. And then absolute silence. I awoke, with a jolt, heart racing, surrounded by nothing but empty darkness. The faint echo of the vampire lord's laughter still rang in my ears, a memory that clawed at the edges of my sanity. I blinked rapidly, desperately trying to dispel the remnants of fear that clung to me like dew on cold grass. Gradually, I registered the stony ground beneath me. Pain shot through my body as I pushed myself upright. Hands trembling, I looked around, yet nothing met my gaze. No spectral battles, no pleading wraiths. Only the stillness of a void, deep and unsettling. Was it all just an elaborate dream? I wondered, the silence now doing little but mocking my uncertainty. Then, a dim light flickered in the distance, barely piercing the pitch. Hope surged with trepidation as I forced myself to stand, every inch of me screaming in protest. I staggered forward, the light's warm glow beckoning. With each step, the heaviness in my chest began to dissipate, a sense of freedom growing, like a fresh breath of air awakening long dormant parts of me. But as I approached, the light revealed a familiar place, the very same dappled medieval town where I had found that cursed well. Ghostly figures flickered on its periphery, their faces twisted in anguish, but not yet vibrant enough to make sense of their expressions. No, the townspeople just stood there waiting. "Please help!" A small voice pierced through the cocoon of my thoughts, and my stomach turned. Heart racing anew, I recognized it instantly. The child. The very essence I had traversed such unimaginable despair to reach. I rushed toward the sound and finally beheld a figure standing before the well, bathed in ethereal light, an apparition of innocence marked by an unmistakable sorrow. "Where are you?" I called, voice a desperate whisper, my steps quickening. "I'm here." The child looked lost, their eyes wide with fear, flickering as if trapped between different worlds. As I neared the well, time seemed to fracture again, with echoes of the past swirling around me, the vampire's piercing gaze cutting through the fabric of my recollection, urging me to remember. "No!" the child screamed, the shadows twisting to engulf their figure, blending it into the churn of sorrowful souls surrounding us. The darkness threatening the town came to life, a vortex of betrayal and heartache that shifted between dimensions. "Help us! Find the dagger!" they shrieked, the glimmer of their form fading, replaced by whispers of those whose desires had yet to be quelled. A wave of despair swept over me. It was clear now. I was not just a passerby, I had been the linchpin in their suffering. I inhaled sharply as realization dawned. I needed to confront the horror once more, but wield the dagger not as a weapon, but as a means to set them free. Moving with purpose, I approached the well and gripped the hilt of my dagger, feeling a surge of energy prepare to course through me. This time, the shadows would not control me. I would confront the curse and unleash whatever dormant power lay within the child's laughter. This beckoning spirit lost to darkness. Join us. The specters wailed collectively, their dissonant voices rising to a fever pitch as I plunged the dagger into the earth surrounding the well. A tremor rolled through the ground, and the ensuing shockwave sent the spectral figures spiraling into chaos, their anguished forms colliding as shadows, tears filled with centuries of heavy grief washing over me. As the light pulsed from the dagger, the child's figure coalesced, shimmering with vibrant energy. Yes. Together. They beckoned, extending their hand toward me, their presence filling the air with warmth against the consuming cold. With one final surge, I grasped their small hand tight, anchoring my spirit in the current. On my count, the child urged. 3, 2, 1. We shouted together, and as our voices blended, warmth pulsed throughout my soul, engulfing the anguished cries surrounding us. In that moment, the shadows ripped away like paper. Nobody remained as layers of pain were stripped from the world, revealing a new dawn behind the veil of darkness. The whispers of the damned began to shift, transforming from screams of despair into soft murmurs, as if each soul were catching a breath for the very first time. But then it hit me, an undeniable truth, harsh like shards of glass. The vampire's laughter echoed one last time, reverberating through the tomb of forgiveness. Your choices carry a weight, he taunted. You cannot escape the past. And suddenly, the light surged, enveloping me completely, bathing us in purity so raw it felt like a baptism. As my hand and the child's finally interlocked, I felt myself pulled, entwining dimensions, reality fracturing like fragile glass. But then came the chilling realization, deep and profound. The dagger was now linked to me, but so was the darkness born of centuries, an eternal tether binding us in ways I couldn't comprehend. As the last remnants of the figures I sought to liberate whispered goodbye, I felt their gratitude interlace with my very being, yet I knew that some part of their sorrow remained. An echo would always accompany me, lurking in the shadows I could no longer escape. And as the sun began to rise, illuminating the cruel shadows of the past, an insidious whisper resounded through my heart, piercing with an unmistakable hint of evil, you're one of us now. The cycle never ends,